The Emerging Alkebulan. We continue today with our Alkebulan Awakening series. As always, myself, Oladile Dosumu, my sister Nduku, and Fazul, our brother Fazul Daniels from South Africa, Nduku Kenyan, obviously myself Nigerian, and our special guest today is Mr. Terry Jackson from the States. Just before we go deep, I'm just going to give us a brief overview of what we're trying to do. The Emerging Alkebulan is about bridging the gap between the continents and the diasporans, bringing ourselves together to find solutions that's going to break us, transform the way we think, decolonize our minds, and basically work together to make the Alkebulan fit for every one of us who want to go back to. That's basically why we're here. So we're kind of putting all the clogs together, putting all the dots together, bringing ourselves together to do the work, basically to push ourselves to where we need to be. We are Alkebulan, mother of mankind, and it's about time we start manifesting that. Okay, Nduku, you want to say a few words? Faz, you want to say a few words, and then we'll pass it over to Mr. Jackson to take over the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother Oladile. My name again is Nduku Mulumba, born and raised in Kenya. I am not limited to those borders, though. I am a global African. I'm an African before I am a Kenyan. And therefore, I can stand together with my Nigerian brothers, together with my brother, who's a descendant of enslaved Africans. I can stand together with any African and see myself in them. And I'm a co-host on Kumbukeni, a podcast that is helping decolonize our minds. And we have recently started a community. It's called Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba. Look out for more information on that. We'll be needing all your support. We'll be sending out information on that. But that's me in a nutshell.
Hi, everybody. I think the audio is playing up on my side. I'm hoping it's not my signal. It looks like pretty good here. No wind, no rain, and no load shedding. The things that South Africa is very infamous for, the load shedding. My name is Faisal Daniels. I'm a political scientist by training, a former revocrat, Nduku. I think that's what you would prefer. Not a politicrat or a bureaucrat, but a revocrat, a revolutionary politicrat. I have also recently made a decision to rejoin the formal body politic of South Africa with a completely new movement. I don't know if I'm still being heard because my screen is completely white now. A completely new movement in the South African body politic. Oh yeah, I'm still here. And I just wanted to say a few things, Dr. Jackson. I am sure even the Bible, the scriptures, warn us about the false prophets. And the false prophets, of course, for them to be successful in any way, they have to be believable. Otherwise, people will see them from a mile on, and they will still be false, but they won't get the prophet status, right? So I want to caution against the likes of Malema. I think Nduku, my sister, she's very close to Malema, and I have made some serious comments about him. And she's invited him to come and contest those comments. We hope before or maybe after the elections, when he has more time, he will come here and contest those not assumptions, but those comments that I've made about him and so on. He hasn't done that yet, but we can hope, because unless he contests them, they stand.
Messy.
Unless he contests them, those comments stand, right? I mean, this seems to be normal decorum. And then I wanted to say another thing about something that you mentioned, right? When I came in, this thing about transformational thinking. We are going to be flies on the wall. We're going to be listening to you. You're the expert. But transformational thinking, I think, if I want to ask you off the bat to be as broad as possible, because I mean, it is not a particular kind of thinking. It is your entire thinking. It is your entire mindset. It is your worldview, your world philosophy, the way you look at the world, the way you interact with that world, and so on and so on. And so therefore, it has to include, in my opinion, also the esoteric, because actually all transformation obviously happens in the esoteric, right? So I wanted to just put 2 cents about who I am and the kinds of things that I think about during the day, you know. Thanks, Oladile.
Also,
Awesome.
myself, sorry, Terry, let me just quickly go. Myself, Oladile Dosumu, obviously the co-founder of Imagine Alkebulan. I've given you a brief overview of what we're about, but this is the reason why we've got Terry Jackson here, my brother. So, Terry Jackson is going to be talking about transformational thinking, a vehicle for Alkebulan liberation. He put African, but I put Alkebulan liberation. So, Terry Jackson, if you want to introduce yourself, I'll let you take the show away, sir.
Okay, thank you so very much. It's an honor a pleasure to be here and to be your guest. It sounds like it's going to be an extremely interesting show, but this discourse is actually needed. You know, we need to have different, I guess, diverse thoughts, so that when we create solutions based upon all of the diverse thoughts to create a solution that is much better than any individual uh, solution. So I am Dr. Terry Jackson, and I am the author of Transformational Thinking, the first step toward individual and organizational greatness. And so with that, the gentleman Faisal, he started talking about how he views transformational thinking, and I had to smile simply because, I'm in agreement with what he said, because transformational thinking is actually a philosophy. And I remember hearing Professor Theophile Obanga, and I'm sure you're probably very familiar with him, speak to the fact that we have to initially study topics and subjects from a philosophical perspective. And we're not really taught that. And I can tell you, especially in the US, unless you're in a PhD type of program, you really don't get the depth of the philosophical approach to studying, so that you can really understand the very root of it. So transformational thinking is a philosophy, and it is an enhanced thinking system. And so what we do is we challenge all assumptions. Uh, and in challenging all assumptions as individuals, as organizations, it's a it's something that we do that is practical. It's practical living philosophy. It's universally applicable. It's inclusive of all thoughts. It is skill based, and it's very simple to learn. And out of this transformational thinking, what we've also created is what we call our 11 P's of transformation. And when you go through the 11 P's of transformation, it enables you to examine every aspect of life and of being. And so the first is perception. How do you perceive? The second P is potential. The third P is principles. What principles do you stand on? The fourth is passion. The fifth is politics, but it's not politics as you know it. It's politics about how do you get things done through others, not necessarily the political system as a whole, because we have to be able to understand how to get things done. So then we begin to examine people, which is an element of the 11 P's. Next is purpose. You move to plans, processes, perseverance, and pliability. So those are what I call the 11 P's of transformation. And I can go into a thesis about each and every one. So it is a holistic philosophy that allows you to uh, examine every aspect of your life, from your spiritual to people to people within your uh, network, to people as a whole, and your perception of the world, how you see it, which means that leads to a paradigm shift, right? Or examining of mental models. I also get people to pay close attention to what I call mental chatter, because oftentimes we all have mental chatter that's going on in our head, but what we have to understand is that mental chatter is not necessarily us. It's the thoughts that we are having, right? Um, so there's a great deal that I could go into, but at this point, I just gave you an overview of transformational thinking, the 11 P's that are instrumental and very significant in going through the process. See, when you think of the butterfly and the caterpillar, see, the caterpillar, it doesn't know that its life is ending and it's becoming a butterfly. It trusts the process. And a butterfly is not a new kind of caterpillar. It's a whole entirely different being. And so when people go through the process, it's about going from caterpillar to butterfly and being a new being, not something that is a model of an old being. Let me give you an example. People like to talk about change. People love talking about change. Well, if I decide I'm going to change my eating habits and I'm going to lose 10 pounds, if I don't go through the mental work of transformation, I'll go through and I'll lose the 10 pounds. But 6 months later, I may gain those 10 pounds back. I may gain 15 pounds back because I didn't transform my lifestyle, my eating habits, my relationship to food, my relationship to my health, my relationship to exercising, such that when I make that physical change, the mental change also happens. But the mental change has to happen first. That's change. Change can be reversed. Transformation can't. The caterpillar, excuse me, the butterfly never becomes the caterpillar again. But transformation is a continuous process, so it's always growth. You're always looking for, how can I be better today than I was yesterday? And what do I have to do? And you're challenging all assumptions. So as we speak to this transformation as a vehicle for liberation, that's the process and the journey that's never ending.
You're right, Terry. Oh, yeah, you can carry on.
I wasn't sure if there were questions that one wanted
Okay.
to begin to ask, and I can go more in depth into transformation, because it's like a quote that I'm sure that you've heard.
Okay, go
When
on.
the
That
student
was
is
great.
ready, the teacher
Yeah.
will appear.
Sorry, give me a second. I'm just gonna unmute. Yeah, go on, Ndoku.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. As you were giving the 11 P's, your sound was a little choppy. So if you can please go through the 11 P's one more time.
Okay, we'll do.
Thank you.
The 11 P's of transformation are
Yeah.
perception,
Yep.
potential, principles,
Yep.
passion, politics, people, purpose, plans, processes, perseverance, and pliability. And they're all
Pliability.
interconnected. Yes, pliability. They're all interconnected. And you can enter the 11 P's at, at any P at any time, but you're going to have to evaluate all of the 11 P's to make it holistic.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay. Yeah. Any questions, guys?
I'm not sure who in this system of oppression is trying to silence Dr. Terry from giving his 11 P's, but I'm going to say them loud and clear. The 11 P's are perception, potential, principles,
Yes.
passion, politics, people, purpose, plans, processes, perseverance, and pliability. yes, we will fight against the systems that try to keep us down.
Hmm.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much, because it got a bit choppy there when you were talking, but yeah. Okay. Any questions before Terry carries on?
I loved that analogy with the butterfly, right? That was a brilliant analogy. And that analogy goes deep into what we must understand as Africans if we're going to walk towards liberation, full liberation. We cannot bring along the Western ways, is what Dr. Terry is saying. But uh,
Yes.
you're talking about a caterpillar knowing very well that today I am going in that cocoon, this is it for me, and trusting the process, not asking, what is the solution? What is on the other side? Do you have the solution on the other? This is Africans. This is Africans when you tell them we must walk towards liberation. We must get rid of white people in Africa. We must get rid of the imperialists in Africa. They're like, oh, but what are we going to do next? No, get in the damn cocoon. Die first, and then we can figure out what happens next. That's what the caterpillar
Yep.
does. And when the caterpillar does that and trusts the process, a beautiful butterfly is born.
That's transformation. I love it.
Yeah. Can I say something? I'm trying to understand the logistics of this platform. So my brother Sam, because I see my brother from South Africa, Desmond Stimela, is putting there that he needs the P's again in the comments, and so I'm checking. I'm trying to understand if Sam can see that so that he can post the comments, the 11 P's in the comments,
Yeah,
or
that's
is it?
why I
Okay.
repeated them. I
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
that.
but
And it's 11, not 6. Yes.
yeah, it's 11 now. All right, so I too am. I Butterflies are one of my favorite things because I'm a gardener. I'm a farmer, and one of the signs of a good healthy garden is a butterfly, together with ladybirds and slug eaters and lizards and so on. But I think if we are talking about the Alkebulan, one of the first things that we have to understand, uh, uh, going on an esoteric level, Dr. Jackson. Um, One of the quotes about butterflies is that just when they think that life is over, something new, something more beautiful emerges as a continuation of life, and so on. And so there's a there's a mindset in the self-loathing African that there's nothing beyond this white man's world, this continent that we live on. It's the white man's world. Let me first be clear about this. This continent that we live on is a white, patriarchal, Christian world created by design and desire. But that social engineering project, Doc, you can tell me if you are in agreement or in disagreement. In my opinion, humbly said, uh, the social engineering project's success is measured by the extent to which we as Black people defend the outcome, the result, the self-hating, self-loathing Black Alkebulan brothers and sisters. That's how success. That's where you measure the success of it. And so it is not only in our thinking; it is tattooed on our DNA, right? And so how we talk. These are the big issues, and at some point we are going to come to you, Dr. Jackson, and we're going to ask you. So we have talked about these big issues now. Transformational thinking. How do we unpack it? Because yes, it's true that we have lost our tongue almost. The First Nations have lost their tongue by design and desire. In South Africa, for instance, in 1994, the vice president made the country slogan a Bushman saying, diverse people unite. And for the next 30 years until this year, try to eradicate the memory of the Bushman. The people who are supposed to tell us how to live light-footedly so that our footprints leave a planet for those who come after us in the same way that they left it for us. But success in 2023 is measured in the size of your carbon footprint, right? So we, as Black African people, men and women, teaching our children that it is okay to think these delegated thoughts. We are thinking these thoughts on behalf of white people. And we think the world will end if white people go away. And so I am diving right into what we are asking you. And I'm not going to ask the question. I'm leaving it open-ended, just like that. You can do with it whatever yearning wants to come out of your body. For the rest of us,
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for leaving the question open. It takes me back to something Malcolm X asked back in the 60s, and he said, "Who taught you to hate yourself?"
Mm.
We know who taught us to hate ourselves. Why did they teach that? Because with everything we've ever done, we've excelled. In order to hold a person or people hostage or in slavery, I have to deconstruct the success that your ancestors had,
Mm.
teach you that you were nothing, and teach you that my way is the right way, the only way, quote unquote, the white way. We know, and I like to have the conversation from a very scientific and biological explanation when we start talking about when when they go looking for the first human or to understand humanity, where do they go? They go to the continent of Africa.
yeah,
When we start talking about the first man, who was a heavily melanated man. See, they've given us the terms of African, they've given us black, they've given us all of those descriptors, and then they've used their descriptor to show a superiority because of how they've written the dictionaries. If you look in the dictionary, at least you'll see everything black is negative and everything white is positive, right?
Mm.
But there was a purpose for that, and that's the deconstructing of the African mindset. But if I use the word heavily melanated in such a way that my melanin protects me from the sun, and when I'm in the sun, I may get darker, but my skin doesn't burn. As opposed to if they're in the sun, their skin burns. They get melanoma, which is skin cancer, right? So the
Mm.
skin, the sun ravages their skin. It can take them to the brink of death, if not death itself. Whereas it blesses me. There has to be something to that biologically, right? There has to, there's a scientific truth to that outside of the conversation of race, because we know that race is a man-made construct. We know that racism in and of itself, we are we are the ones that is perpetrated against for the most part. However, when we look at the greatness of what came from the continent, from the smelting of iron back 1500 years ago, to the original man, to flying machine apparatuses that took place, because it's written in stone. It's written in stone, to all of the gold and the minerals that come out of the earth. We come out of a place of greatness, and by giving us doctrines, religious doctrines, that if you use a little bit of common sense, you could read through the words. For instance, there's a place in the Bible where it says God told, I think it was Hagar, to put his hand in his cloak and pull it out. And when he pulled it out, it was as white as snow. So what was it before it went in? And when he put it back in, it returned to its original color. There also is a place in the Bible that said When someone was leprous, they were as white as snow. So leprosy had nothing to do with sores on the body. It had to do with being white. And I tell people all the time, even with the Christian doctrine of the Bible, there were no white people in the Bible. Let's take a look at let's take a look at where everything took place. And then from a historical perspective, let's take a look at where the sun was and what the sun was doing, right? So it's impossible. So we have to speak from, and what they don't want you to do is speak from historically accurate research. Let's take example. Let's take a look at Palestine and what's happening there now. Well, if you know the history behind it, you know exactly what the truth is. So they send all kind of messages out to you. If you don't read, and if you become extremely emotional, then you will fall behind the support of a group of people that entered the continent of Africa, stole a certain people's culture, left, came back and tried to sell that same culture back to a people who were the original people of that culture. If you know your history and if you've read. So, transformational thinking is about deconstructing how the Africans are thinking about themselves and how they see others. I get the feel that a great deal of true history is not given to those on the continent.
No.
If it were, you would have true revolution happening. You would have happening what's happening in Burkina Faso, in
Yep.
Niger, Mali. That would be happening across the entire continent. It would be unstoppable. And what would also happen with that is you would now get those in the diaspora who would begin to join, because my whole thought process is this: Africa is great, but it won't be as great as it can be until those on the continent and those in diaspora come together. That's my thought process. We have the know-how, we have the technology. Let's think about the internet. The gentleman who created the internet, right? He was Nigerian. We have been the creator of just about everything that we know, but it's been taken from us to make us think that we were worthless. When you go take a look at the patent, and some patents we couldn't have for the mere fact that we were enslaved, and the person who actually took the credit for the patent was those who were the colonizer, the oppressor. Even in the US, when you start looking at these major corporations and those who are in the lab creating a lot of what we know from products and services and goods, they're black scientists. The computer chip itself was made from a melanin crystal. Those are the truth. Those are the facts and the truth that has to come out on the continent so people can understand who you truly are, who your ancestors were. We talk about Mansa Musa, out of Timbuktu, and with all the gold that he had. And the myth is, when he traveled this way and ended up down in Mexico, he was actually the character that we call Montezuma. So we have always, there would not be, let me say this. We know that everyone comes from us. It's just that simple. Two Asians can't make an African. Two whites can't make an African. It just can't happen. We create the spectrum of everything. Black is not a color. It is the essence of where everything comes from. but that takes repetition, right? That's a teaching process that takes repetition, because such propaganda has hit not only the African continent, but the same propaganda here. There are some African Americans or blacks here who won't go to a black doctor because they don't think that a black doctor is as knowledgeable as a white doctor.
Yeah.
So the brainwashing is universal, because white supremacy racism is a universal system. Now, if you're familiar with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, what she said was, if you understand that everything that white people do is really about white genetic survival, and until you understand race and racism, everything else will confuse you. So when you're looking at policy, when you're looking at institutions, at the very foundation of those institutions is white genetic survival.
Hmm.
That's it. So you look at what's happening on the Gaza Strip. You look at what's happening on, everyone is coming to Africa. It's the last vestige. All the minerals that you need for whatever it is, because the tech companies couldn't survive without coltan. They couldn't survive whatsoever. So if they couldn't survive, then that's really about their survival, right? We have to understand that. So it's real simple, because I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't understand what they're doing. I don't understand. Here it is. To understand them is to understand that everything is about white genetic survival. In the US, and it might be across the globe, you can check the research. But for every 2 white people that are that die, there's not one born. For every 2 that die, there's not one born. So what that says is they're at a below zero growth rate. I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but back in the 90s, a guy named Patrick Buchanan, who was in the White House, as a part of the administration, wrote a book, Death of the West. And in that book, he highlighted exactly what I just said: below zero growth rate. And because the media is controlled, what we also know is that globally, white people only make up 12 to 13% of the world's population. That means that there's about 88% of the population that's people of color. So what I ask is, instead of, in the US, they like to call us uh, people of color. I said, well, why don't we say people without color? It only makes sense to me. They asked me to think locally and think globally. Well, if I think globally, I know I'm the majority. I'm part of the majority. I'm not a minority. But they use the word minority here in the States. And most importantly, what I ask people to do is to approach me as a human being. And if you want to take a look at the spelling of human, it's HEU-MAN. I'm a man with hue, because the majority of the people in the world have hue. And the other people I've heard, I think I heard in some speeches, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said they're kind of a man, not man. They're mankind, not man.
That
So
kind of a man.
when it comes to transformational thinking, and it relates to all of this, I have to challenge every thought that I have, because every thought that I have has been given to me by somebody who's foreign from me. So I have to examine myself. I have to go do the research, and I have to read. Um, and then I have to question. Yes, sir. I see you have your hand up there,
Uh,
and you're
I mean,
you're, you're muted.
oh, It's not me.
You're good. I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice that I was muted there. I was saying you're going to fast, and I did leave it open for exactly this, but I did want to say a number of things arise for me. So I'm going to see if I can remember two of them. The first thing is, if you want to transform the entirety of the, I know the way we describe ourselves are even foreign to us. So I'm saying the black thinking, but I know we never called ourselves this. But it's maybe it's for another debate. Let's use it for the audience sake and maybe for the discussion. But sometimes these terms, the terminology is maybe convoluted, it's maybe superfluous, or it's maybe up there. And I would like to. I always say, if a rocket scientist can't explain his job to a 5-year-old, he doesn't properly understand it. So I want to say, if you want to problematize this white is right thing as juxtaposed to everything black is, evil and dark and so on, it is very easy to open your kitchen cupboard. And if you look at the things that is going to give you the lifestyle diseases, and it's going to give you immune diseases, it is going to give you diseases. 80% of all diseases start in the gut. It's going to give you diseases like MS, multiple sclerosis, cancer, and so on. And what I'm talking about is white flour, white sugar, and white salt. Because these white things, as beautiful as they look, being Snow White and all of that, they have taken with another whitening substance called bleach. They have bleached the natural goodness out of it and then created minerals in a lab, in a factory setting, and then reinforced this bland flour and sugar and salt, essentially creating a part of the global subjugation. Because remember, the social engineering project you and I are referring to, and the one that we all understand, this white supremacy thing, is part of the dominion search and the conquest and the pursuit for global dominion, right? And so it's our food, our water, the air that we breathe. It is the schooling system. It is when you go to church. It is a complete thing. But if you, as a black person, want to problematize white is right and black is dark, you just go into your kitchen. I mean, this is the one thing I want to say. I do want to ask Dr. Jackson that, let us say we 50, 75 years down the line, we are starting to transform our thinking as a race. Where does that leave the Caucasians? Because for them to survive, they will have to transform their own thinking. And how does these two transformational thinking processes link up, hook up at some point, crisscross? Because our pursuit is not a black world. Our pursuit is a freedom that we have had 5, 6, 7,000 years ago. As global leaders in mathematics, the sciences, the languages, astrology, all of it, even in civilization building. That's where I don't. I mean, people say that I could easily be described as bloodthirsty because I said South Africa didn't get its freedom the way it should have by revolution, blood on the floor, because we were handed our freedom. We were given democracy not by the ANC. I mean, we are duped into thinking that the ANC brought this democracy. We were given this freedom by whoever handles the ANC in London. The same people handle all the liberation movements in Africa. But I mean, it also is another conversation. I'm saying, if we can honestly look with the eyes that we have, that lives in our head, and the eyes that live in our heart, and the eyes that live in our gut, these three sets of eyes will light a clear path with, little bits of solar panel lights on the path, so that we can see where we're going. Because right now we are following the white man blindly, and guess what? The white man doesn't know jack. All that he knows is stole from here, and he went to write it over there in his books, and now he even believes it. If you take your example, sorry for taking long, this is where I'm ending off. If you take your example of Palestine, and this is an explanation of how the world is today. You have Europeans, Caucasians with Mongol and Kazan ancestry who were kicked out by Europe. So I'm talking white people, Mongols from the east, and Kazans from north of the Middle East. People know, right? They were kicked out of Europe. They were hated. They were despised, and they were put on a boat, and they were taken in by these brown people who's always been hospitable in the Middle East, and they rewrote the history that they themselves now believe. The history books they wrote for the rest of the world. The weird thing is, their lack of hue and melanin is the first thing that upends their argument that they are native to this place that they are killing people in for. So how does a white person go into a black person's house and say, well, actually, I lived there before you? But that is how this is what we need to deconstruct, because this is what they constructed. I don't know. I'm all over the show. I'm gonna give it back to you.
I wanted to take it back, unless Dr. Jackson, you want to say something, but I wanted to take it back to the 11 P's, right? If you can speak on each of them and how they can help us transform our thinking, please.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
When we
Do you want to deal with? Yeah, go on.
okay, I talked about paradigm shift, right? And I'm going to call it paradigm expansion. That's number one, because we're dealing with perception, right? Of how do we see the world? How do we see things that are happening to us on a day-to-day basis? How do we reframe what we see, even if it's similar, so that we can get something different from it, right? Because that's what we really need to be able to do. How do we sit in the same place but see it differently? So we you know we got to simply learn that in order to change our perception, first and foremost, we have to have an open mind. And, and we have to understand that this whole transformation is an inside out process. We have to understand that change imposed or dictated from the outside will never work. And the gentleman said earlier, Faisal said earlier, you know,
Dr. Jackson, there's a problem with your audio.
okay, can you hear me? Hello? Is it better? I'm sitting still.
Maybe
You
no,
hear me?
it's choppy. Maybe the virtual background is interfering. I don't know what is interfering, but it's making it choppy.
Can we check
Okay,
with Sam how it is for the audience?
and it could just
Brother
simply
Sam?
be the
Yeah,
signal.
try again.
Simply the signal.
I think it sounds.
Yeah, sometimes if you have a lot going on your screen, so maybe try taking out the, I don't know how much you want the virtual background, but that might.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Yeah, Terry, I think it sounds a bit better now. Carry on talking. I think it sounds better.
Is that better? Can you hear me better?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. Yeah, we can hear you better now.
Okay. See, one of the things when we start talking about thinking is in transformational thinking, we use lateral thinking versus linear thinking. We're taught from a Western perspective to think linearly, as well as I'm sure on the continent, given the fact that who's doing a lot of the educating, you're taught to think linearly as well. And there's a difference in the lateral thinking and the linear thinking. You know, and I'm hoping that
Terry, excuse me. I think it's still a bit choppy. I don't know what's going on there. I think there's a bit of
okay.
interference
Let
there.
me if let me do this real quick. Is that better? I know you can't see me, but is okay?
Yeah, that's
Okay, all right.
it. Sounds a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, good. And I know sometimes that happens to me when I'm on with others that I can't hear them, but then when they so just remember the face that you saw, and I'll get on with the content.
Okay.
Now, lateral thinking is a toolbox that we have around it's a cognitive tool that we utilize, right? So there's a toolkit that comes along with transformational thinking that we won't be able to dig into all of the details today. What I like to be able to do is talk about where I think a lot of the 11 P's can be used. And with every country that exists, there's an economic foundation to every country. And the reason that people are in Africa is because of the minerals that drive the economics. When you look at Africa and what's being manufactured there, which is very little, part of the first challenge is not to create a system of manufacturing and a system of education. So we want to teach people how to manufacture raw products that can be sold out on the marketplace. So it begins to improve the financial wealth of the masses of Africans, not just the leaders. Because we know I worked with the Congo for about 2 years on trying to help them secure high speed satellite internet. And everybody had their hand out wanting to get paid to take me to the next person to help me get a contract. But nobody could promise that I would ever get the contract. So that's a mindset of a leader that we can't afford. And actually, those types of leaders should never be in place because they were purely looking out for themselves versus the masses of the people. I presented to the ambassador of Liberia in 2012 in Washington, D.C., a food system that will allow them to grow fruits and vegetables in greenhouses, build a manufacturing facility so that they could make packaged goods that they could sell throughout the country as well across the continent of Africa. It would have made them like a Kellogg, right? A global. It would have made their country a lot of money because at the time Liberia had about 85% unemployment. I thought it was a pretty simple deal. However, it never happened. And again, we're talking greenhouses, and each greenhouse would produce 1 million pounds of food. One greenhouse produces 1 million pounds of food, fresh fruits and vegetables, because they were talking about food security and what was happening uh, as it relates to food prices across the world and the impact that it had on Africa because of some small budgets, some small countries, right? So it was an easy fix. Nothing happened. Recently, I've had conversation with some significant people on the continent of Africa and in the diaspora around helping them monetize their rights and concessions to minerals that they can mine so that they can begin to create wealth and build and create jobs. And the challenge that I found is everybody was interested in money, but there was no organization. I have some friends who are investment bankers who look like you and I, who are black, who've been at it for 25 years, who can take all types of instrument, create money, leverage it, and provide the funding that's needed. So I'm getting at the very root of transformation right now. The very root is economics. That's the very root. That's what makes it go. And the transformation that needs to happen at the top is we don't need the presidents in place who's going to look to make themselves wealthy versus the masses of the people. There's no way in the world that if I go to the palace in the Congo, I should see children sitting outside with laptops trying to access the internet signal, the Congo, because I can't get it at home. And the administration is not willing to ensure that everyone has it. Because if we can close the digital divide, we can expedite the educational process that is happening on the continent so that those people on the continent can begin to manage and lead for themselves. It's not difficult to do, right? I think it's real simple. I think it's an issue of, you know, everybody, as Malcolm X said, everybody can't go. Everybody's not going to be saved.
Yeah.
Only the ones who want to go. And the ones who, transformational thinking is about obliterating the status quo, because the status quo has always been the enemy, and comfort is the enemy to comfort is the enemy as well. So the people there on the continent are comfortable. They got to step outside the comfort zone, right? I know there's a new leader in Liberia, and I've had people who reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want you to come here and do some work with us around transformational thinking and helping create organizations." Because I led $1 billion division of an organization, so I know what it is to build. I know what it is to grow. I know what it is to lead people. I know what it is to develop people. That's what I do for a living as a consultant. I have a leadership development company, and I deal with process improvement. That's what I do. I understand economics and finance because of my business background. I've worked for the large companies like ExxonMobil, and I know that they're part of the problem there as well, because everybody's still looking for petroleum, even though we're talking about electric vehicles, right? They have not stopped the search for petroleum, and they're not going to stop the search because there's too many products made out of petroleum, not just gasoline. Gasoline is the worst product made from petroleum. You get that from the worst part of a barrel of oil is gasoline, right? So, but there are other products that help drive from that come from petroleum. So I understand that. I even asked a friend of mine who was at the time when Helen Johnson Sirleaf was the president of Liberia, a good friend of mine, Robert Ijoma Flemister, uh, was her best friend. Now, Mr. Flemister, he was the general secretary to President Tolbert back in the late 70s. Well, he became a good friend of mine in Columbus, Ohio. And I said, I just saw where Liberia, this oil company just gave them $11 billion because they discovered oil. I said, so how much is that company going to make? If they could afford to give you 11 billion, how much are they going to make? I wanted to position myself to be able to help some of these presidents or governments negotiate how much they're supposed to get, right?
Charge.
I just heard a story where Kenya sold a bunch of land to the Chinese. It never should have happened. If anything, they should have leased it to them. If anything, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is the Chinese are going to force the Kenyans out of Kenya.
Yeah.
Economics is at the very root of everything you do, and economics is more than just money. It's
Yeah.
it's it's, it's how you live. It's about choices that you're able to make.
Mm.
And but people have a tendency to think economics is purely a dollar or whatever your currency is, and it's more than that, right? And you talk about the social engineering. We've all been socially engineered, right?
Mm.
So transformational thinking is about breaking out of that. And we talk about freedom all the time when we should be talking about liberation, because freedom and liberation are two totally different things.
Yeah.
When Abraham Lincoln, when they give him credit for the Emancipation Proclamation, we knew that freedom meant, or to emancipate meant to release from your control, but not from your hand.
Hmm.
We have to release all of those types of thoughts, right? That's what it means to be a transformed thinker, right? Think for yourself. Within transformational thinking, we have what we call a free thinking zone, right? And in the free thinking zones is where you come up with all these great ideas. Again, I use the example of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger.
Mm.
True transformational thinking principles being used there. The creation of a whole new entity of those three companies, and then taking their economic empowerment into their own hands versus those who have ruled them in the past.
Oh, Terry, can I ask you a question there while you're talking there?
Yes, sir.
Um, this is the question basically addressed to a lot of the thought processes that I encounter every single day as I do a lot of posts online. Yeah, you know I do. And what people all tend to say is we they don't think to think that they can change something because of the systems that are in place. A lot of Africans are so used to the systems, the colonizer systems in place, everything that they've been indoctrinated into, they can't seem to find us or see a way to actually take themselves away from that to create something new. Like you've alluded to, Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria are doing it. And as a Nigerian, my frustration, and I say frustration, is the fact that how could a continent rely so heavily on a dollar?
Hmm.
And I'm taking that because a lot of people listening to this, and I say this all the time. How can you be so focused on the dollar when they've got you to devalue your own local currency, then use their currency to buy their goods, which basically makes your what you're buying basically worth nothing? How can we get ourselves away from those kind of thinking to make us think, you know what, we can create something completely different from nothing? And you've said it, because I need Africans to understand that when it comes to transformational thinking, it's getting away from what's been, straight in the bin, start all over again. Can you say something to that for me, please?
I'm going to speak, and hopefully I'm not choppy. Hopefully it's better. And
Yeah,
if
you
if if,
sound
if
good.
it becomes
You sound
choppy,
good.
you let me know, and I'll take myself off the screen again. I'm gonna use the example of Gaddafi. What was he actually trying to do with the creation of an entirely new currency in which they were going to trade oil in that currency, which meant that the US will then have to, and it was a gold backed currency, where the US would have to be able to purchase oil on the market with gold. I think it was the dinar, DINAR, if I'm not mistaken. And then let's look at what happened. We know what happened to Brother Gaddafi, right? There's a great book when you talk about systems. One, you have to fight a system with a system. So you have to create your system. You can't create programs. Programs come to an end. It's a system that defeats another system. So if there's real liberation that is needed or wanted, then you have no choice but to create a system. It's amazing to me And there's a great book that talks about the whole model that's always used by the US when they go into different countries. The name of the book is Confessions of an Economic Hitman
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
by John Perkins.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember reading that book back in maybe, I don't know, 2007, 2008, 2009, something like that. But he laid out the model of what we do. And even before the book, we also knew that normally what they do is send in the missionaries and then send in the military. And once the US military is on your soil, we never leave.
Mm.
We can check all the other countries we've ever been to, and we still have bases there for the most part. And I know that there's US soldiers on African soil.
Yeah.
It's to
In Ghana.
protect the US. It's to protect the US interest. And the US interest of the minerals, the oil. Here's what one of my friend Ijoma Robert Flemister told me. He was General Secretary of President Tolbert when Jimmy Carter flew to Liberia. Well, he was flying to Africa, and he initially flew to Nigeria to meet with the president. And with that, he thought that the president there in Nigeria represented all the other presidents. And they said, "Oh no, you have to go back to see President Tolbert." He basically kind of represented all the presidents. And so when President Tolbert heard about Carter going to Nigeria and not recognizing who he was coming to talk to, he became a little upset. So when President Carter landed at the airport in Liberia, there was not a delegation to meet him. He said, "I want you to make him get in a car and come up to the palace in Liberia."
Yes.
Well, when that happened and they sat at the table, at the time is when they wanted to set up, I think it was called AFRICOM. They wanted to set up a base in Liberia to spy on Gaddafi. And President Tolbert said no. And then President Carter offered him 10% of all the minerals extracted out of the continent of Africa as his compensation if they would set up that base. And he
Sure.
said, "No, we will not participate in the assassination, and we will not have the blood on our hands of another African leader." Right after that is when the coup happened in Liberia, and that whole administration, except for one person, was assassinated. I asked Ijoma, I said, "So what happened with you?" He said, "They
Mm.
took me out to the wall, they pulled the trigger, and the gun didn't fire."
Sure.
And he said that's how he survived. And so he was good friends with Robert Taylor, who poisoned him. And he told me the stories of Robert Taylor, and then I've watched the trial that actually put. But he told me this. He said it wasn't the fact that Robert was a war criminal. It was the fact that there were diamond mines off the coast of Liberia that were owned by the Bushes, and Taylor sold those diamond mines from under them. And the only way to get him, it was to take him to trial as a war criminal. But it really had nothing to do with being a war criminal and killing his own people. It was about the economics of the diamonds in the ocean and that he sold from under them. So I go back to the economics of it all simply because transformational thinking has to include economics of the continent of Africa. You have everything that everybody wants. You have to be able to create the businesses to manufacture and sell to the world. That's what they don't want you to do. They don't want you because the US is known for its capitalism, and the capitalism is based upon business. And we know that this whole capital society was built off the backs of our enslaved ancestors. That's how Wall Street was started. Instead of coming over there and enslaving everybody, they just don't develop the continent
Mm.
because they want the raw materials to take elsewhere and send elsewhere to manufacture. You have to get in a position to manufacture your own goods and services. You have to be able to nationalize, as they did in Burkina Faso, the gold. We took it back. We're not sending it anymore to you. we're gonna take it and we're gonna make our own gold bars
Hmm.
and we're gonna sell to the world. And then, as we already see, they're fastly considered the fastest growing economy in the world. Just that quick. Rwanda did the president of Rwanda. I mean, hey, look at how he's turned it around.
Yeah.
So the leaders are there, and I think it's the older leaders that are still loyal to the colonialist.
Mm.
The younger leaders, because if I'm not mistaken, the gentleman in Burkina Faso is only 35 years old.
Yeah, yes, it
So
is.
the
He's
younger
35 years old.
people are seeing it, and they said something's just not right with this system. And so those are the ones who are going to take over. So it's always been the youth. Even in the civil rights movement, it was the youth. Remember, Dr. King was 39 when he was assassinated.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X was young. Medgar Evers was young. They're in their 30s. And so it's always going to be the youth. And the youth is your youth are they're not going to continue to put up with it. The older have become comfortable, they've become accepting of, they're happy, feed, you know, I like to say they feed me cake and only whip me twice a day. I'm happy.
Yeah.
But we have to get out of that kind of mentality.
I'm glad you brought up Oladele, if I may please. I'm glad you brought up Ibrahim Traore and Kagame. And I actually think something cynical is happening there. Kagame has always been a puppet of the West. He has invaded Congo and done terrible things there.
Mm.
And I feel like the West now is asking Kagame to influence Ibrahim Traore in the name of friendship. And I hope Ibrahim Traore will walk cautiously as he walks into or stands by Kagame, because I honestly think Kagame is being used to disrupt the momentum and the thinking that Ibrahim Traore is on right now.
Hmm.
But I'm glad you mentioned them. So I'm saying that given that we're on a public platform, and hopefully that gets to them, to especially to Ibrahim Traore. We had a meeting, and I agree with you that education is one of the main pillars of rebuilding and liberating ourselves, with an African country yesterday. And they said one of the things they need is building a good educational system. And you said also, we have to be, let me look at your exact words, something to do with us taking over the, close the digital divide, right?
Yes,
And I
close the
agree with you.
digital
When
divide.
they
Yes.
said that, immediately I was thinking, okay, how can we provide? We have teachers here, we have African people in the US who are willing to teach, who are capable of teaching. How can we virtually provide that education to the Africans there? And as I started thinking about that, I'm thinking, okay, they need laptops, they can't afford them. How are we going to provide laptops? How, all that. And you're right, we must find the solutions to break down those barriers.
You
So,
don't have laptop. Excuse me. Let me say this real quick. You don't have laptops, but every component that is used to make a laptop comes from Africa.
and then that goes back to you talking about manufacturing. If we actually manufactured those devices in Africa, we would have them at affordable prices, because the cost of manufacturing is cheaper, and we're not going by Western standards that are hiking prices to get 100% profit margins. Because for them it's always top profit margin, it doesn't matter. I have a system that I'm going to be implementing in the business that we just built, and I will be reaching out to you for assistance. But I don't think anyone should make more than 30% profit margin if we're going to be considerate of
Mm.
everyone in the world. No one needs more than 30% profit margin. If we take on that way of
Hmm.
thinking as Africans, where if we're building as Africans, I don't exceed 30%. And when I do, I give it back to the community to rebuild the community. I think we're going to have great, great change.
I agree. There's another great book, business book called Good to Great. And in that business book, Good to Great, he speaks of the fact that companies should not want to grow more than 10% per year. Because what happens is year over year, as you're seeking to exceed that number the next year, it makes it much harder. So now I have to make decisions around letting people go, skimming on my prices, and maybe some of the components that I'm using, I'm not providing the quality that's needed. So you make an excellent point. 30% is excellent. I don't know anybody who wouldn't want 30% margin on any product, right? And even in some of the investment world, 30% is an excellent return. And so that's a great point that you make, and you take the other and you reinvest it into the organization, into the community, across the continent. And more of these leaders have to work together, not necessarily like ECOWAS. I was very disappointed in them when they were talking about going into Niger and Burkina Faso with soldiers and trying to reinstall the previous government. I was greatly disappointed when
Yep.
I saw that and heard that. But that spoke to the mindset, and how the mindset was of that of a Western flavor versus let's do what's the greater good of the continent.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely concur with that. That's my favorite thing to say. You see, these are the typical African leaders that you were talking about. The people who build nothing, who does nothing, who look forward in their calendar to fly to Europe and America to get in buses to go and meet these presidents, like school children. Uh,
It's
hold on,
amazing
hold on.
because I think I heard someone say that if you really want to see how loyal an African leader is to his country, let him get sick. He'll go to a hospital in Switzerland
Yes,
versus
Oh,
going
that's
to
it.
a
yes,
hospital
yes,
in Africa.
yes,
Wow.
yes, yes.
Yeah, that's
I do,
true.
I do have a question. I do have a question for you, which I thought I have to ask you this question, Dr. Jackson. I know, we're already way over the hour mark, but sometimes we can go on for hours like this. So here's this question. I am a former Revocrat. I think I've explained this to you. Spent 20 years in formal politics and so on and so on. And then I left formal politics 2011, so 12 years ago. And last weekend, I was part of the launch of an NGO come political party, so different kind of thinking, called the People's Movement for Change. What resonated with me in terms of seeing what role I can play inside such an organization is it it political parties get on soapboxes and they make promises. This movement went underground into communities across South Africa and consulted them in terms of what they want to see in policies, how they want to see political formations structured, and how would they want to see the government operate, and so on and so on. So for me, that was different. It is also reminding of the process that led up to 1955 in South Africa. The, the event that took place in Kliptown with the adoption of the Freedom Charter. This kind of consultation at a grassroots level. It reminded me as well of the event in 1983 when the United Democratic Front was launched in South Africa. Some grassroots work, uh, mass mobilization where people lived, organized into street committees, neighborhoods, and so, regions and provinces and so on. So this is exactly how this movement came into existence. That's just the setting. Here comes the question. Is it transformational thinking that we are not waiting as a movement to become a part of government or to get into government before we are doing things? I am going to give you two examples because I think the examples will give meat to the question. We have what we call a youth command, and the youth command has invited 500 people from Khayelitsha and Mitchells Plain. That if you put them together, and they are right next to each other, it is the single biggest township made up of people of color in Cape Town. And we're taking 500 young people, and we are saying to them, bring your 20 rand, bring your 100 rand, bring your 200 rand, and we are buying shares in Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed companies. So you are taking these kids with bleak futures and you are elevating them all the way up into what is called big business. It is, in my opinion, a different way of looking at the socio-economic problem of the look. The first assumption on my part as a political scientist is that the government is neither geared to nor willing to or interested in any of the things that will help the people. They are simply doing water and sewage, uh, put a bit of tar back in a pothole when they want to, because I mean, it doesn't happen every day. So here you have a movement that says, no, 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 but this kid doesn't have to be doomed to follow this trajectory of those before him. If he owns a share in Woolworths at the board meeting or at the AGM, he can stand up and say, I don't stand for this nonsense. Or I support this or that or the other. This is the one. The second one in South Africa, and you can ask my brother Desmond there. He's also asked the question to you, and I'm sure that Sam will translate that question to you in, or you could probably see it on your screen as well. In South Africa, the taxi industry is very demonized. We have a government, and the taxi industry is almost exclusively Black African, as in not people without color, right? The bus industry carries 10% of the number of people that the taxi industry is carrying. The bus industry is heavily subsidized. The taxi industry get maybe 10% of what the bus industry gets. We, as a new movement, are saying to them, in Khayelitsha alone, there are 2,000 taxis. If you take 1,000 taxis, and the fuel for 1 week is 1,000 rand, that gives you R1 million. Gives you 30 million rand for 30 days. That's 1 month. It gives you 360 million rand at the end of the year. If you 1,000 taxi owners take 360 million rand, you can put up 5 taxi stations, buy your own petrol, become from hooligans to big business owners. You buy your own petrol, you store your own petrol, and you sell your own petrol. So, is this transformational thinking? Is my question. I mean, it feels like that to me, right? Because maybe I'm too close to it. I want you to be honest with me.
It is, and you're dealing initially in the very first P of perception, because in both examples that you've given around the NGO working with the kids and buying stock, and in the petrol, again, I mentioned reframe. So now you're seeing it differently,
Mm,
and you're seeing what the possibilities are, right? What the opportunities are by taking some kids that no one wants to be affiliated with, don't want to work with them. You're teaching them to buy stock, which means they're going to be getting some of the fundamentals of business and understanding price to earnings ratio when you're looking at buying stock, which one of the measurements of how you determine whether or not you want to buy the stock or not. And then you're looking at, okay, we can become our own entity if we build our own taxi stations, have our own petrol, being able to sell petrol. Right now we go from a demonized industry to a very influential industry. Right, we can help change policy with that. So that is, both are working within actually several P's. You're working within plans because you got to plan it.
mm,
You're working in perception because you got to be able to see it differently, right?
mm,
You're working within people because now you're getting people to work together. That whole politics that I talked about of
mm,
how to get things done through people,
mm,
where the people come together, those taxi drivers in solidarity, those who are working with the youth, through the NGO. You're working with purpose, right? Because that's one of the P's as well. So
mm.
it is, both of those examples are good examples of what transformational thinking. But as you said,
Yeah.
once you have your own and you become the butterfly, it's a continuous journey. It doesn't stop there, right?
Mm.
You got to use those skill sets to be able to see, okay, we have our own taxi stations now. We have our own petrol. We're selling petrol. So what's next? What can we do next? What can we influence next? And it may not necessarily be within the taxi industry. It might be
Yeah.
something else within the transportation industry, or it
Yep.
could be something. So it could be something else, and related, or maybe even non-related,
Yeah.
right? But you continue to. One of my favorite questions is what if. That's how I take a look at challenging assumptions. Well, what if
Yeah.
this? Well,
Mhm.
what if that?
I like that.
At the end of the day, we have to be curious, and curiosity will drive the what if question. They don't want you to be curious, because curious means you're going to ask a ton of questions about a lot of things, and they don't want you to ask questions. Again, because that's questioning the status quo. But it is transformational thinking to answer uh, your question.
Okay. Thanks. Can I just? There's a question posted on the group there, on the chat there. So I'm just going to ask you, Terry. Desmond's asking, what are the actions that we need to do to take responsibility, to drive awareness, to actually make people move away from where they are, from where they need to be? What kind of actions, what awareness can we create? Because obviously, this is one of the reasons why we created the Imagine Alkebulan, to do things like this. So he's asking the same question: how do we drive the awareness? How do we make people know the things they need to do to get them from where they are to where they need to be? Because a lot of people are stuck in where they are, and some of people are struggling to get away from those thinking, to transform the ways. So, what kind of awareness can we create? How can we push this?
Well, first thing is you have to realize that some people are going to remain stuck.
Yeah.
Everybody's not going to be out of being stuck, right?
Yeah.
Some people say they want different, but don't want to do what it means or takes to be different, right? So you got to be able to determine if that's genuine, if it's authentic, right? And so then there's an action. There's an action that comes after that. Let's sit down and have a conversation. I'm going to call it a strategic planning process with those who have similar interest, and you got to take it from paper to the community, right? You also have to be able to show them examples. The prime example is Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso. That's the prime example, right? Are there any other businesses any other businesses that's taking a similar approach? Now, one of the names I didn't mention earlier that I was having some engagement with some years ago, because I was trying to do some consulting for his mines, Rainbow Rainbow Minerals. Patrice Motsepe. I'm sure you're familiar with that name in South Africa, right? I think he was educated in the U.S., went to law school in the U.S., came back, got into gold. He was a big attorney there. Banking is something that I think he was wanted to be big in, but he was a billionaire, if I'm not mistaken. Patrice Motsepe. I think he wanted to do some things differently, but I think because he was educated in the West and he has a Western mind, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But there are examples of what can potentially be
Mm.
that already exists with the Western mind, but we just know when we do it, we're going to do it differently. The grassroots, right? What better way to start an organization than with the people who are in need most? It takes some education, understanding,
Mm.
and then in that education and understanding, show them the examples of what's actually happening. Show them, the amount of resources that actually exist there, because whereas we may see gold a particular way in the US, there might be a gold nugget that somebody is walking down, the path in Africa and is kicking it like it's just normal. It's what we see. Have them to understand that there is a value to others for that. There's an economic value to that, right? And it's where the economics lie that provides the better quality of life for all who exist. So you have to be able to show an example. because people want to see and they want to touch and they want to smell and excuse me, they want to say, well, if this person can do it, I can do it. There's a strong educational component. We know that because you got to get over the mindset, right? A friend of mine wrote a book one time, um, and it was titled "Recapturing the African Mind" by Dr. Bruce Bridges. Recapturing the African Mind. He went over actually to Africa, studied. He talked about the skin bleaching cream and all that he saw, uh, and how that was, of course, came from westernization, what they saw, or wanting to not understanding the power and the significance and the importance of melanin versus looking at white skin and thinking that white skin is pure, given the indoctrination that they've had, not knowing of all the illnesses, as you mentioned, Fazell, the illnesses that come along with being light skinned, white skinned, being in the sun. I'm gonna say this last piece. When you look at nature and you look at trees and you look at the green, the foliage, it's very, I don't know of a lot of foliage that's white. When you look at the jungles and the bush, it's green.
Nothing. Yeah.
Tell them that the green is just like the melanin in the skin. It has a biological function to the plant, to the tree. And we use the sunlight as energy. We even, like plants, have the ability to go through photosynthesis. That research is out there. And it was done by a Mexican scientist back in about 2007. So we as blacks go through photosynthesis just like a plant does. And the plants are green, the foliage is green. If it's white, it lacks nutrients. That's why when you see, and you've seen it, the albino tiger, the white tigers, you never see them in the wild. They're in zoos because they couldn't survive in the wild. Because genetically, they're not as strong. That goes back to understanding white genetic survival. That's the key. White, if you want to really start teaching, get the book by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. The what is it? It's the ISIS papers, Keys to the Colors. She was a psychiatrist. So she was trained. She was a professor. And in all her studies, it came down to all the symbols that exist. She even talked about playing billiards. And at the end of the day, it's the white ball that knocks the black ball off last to clear the table. The psychology behind that. So you want to talk about transformational thinking and the symbols, and read her book and use her book as a tool to teach, to understand that everything they do is about white genetic survival. So I'm going to pass policy that's going to limit you. I'm going to my neighborhood is going to be behind a gate where you can't get to me. That's the challenge here in the States. Is the challenge here in the States is the fact that, I guess you're going to call it desegregation, but race mixing. The someone white marrying someone black, right? And they call them biracial. I said, no, they're not biracial, because DNA doesn't come down 50-50. It comes down 51-41 and dominant. And it goes back to Gregory Mendel, the biologist, who said you can get the recessive from the dominant, but you can't get the dominant from the recessive. Those are things that have to be taught. Brown eyes are dominant, blue eyes are recessive. That's the biology of it all. And that's the scientific fact of it all. That's what the creator created. So that's what the truth is. All the other stuff doesn't matter.
Wow. Okay. Just because of time, we're gonna round up. Guys, have you got any quick questions for Dr. Terry Jackson? And then I'm gonna round up because this has
My
been
my my
been so powerful.
my one takeaway, and I
Oladile,
will
Yes, sir.
my
yeah,
one takeaway, and I will be
okay.
changing my my language, is using melanated instead of black,
Yes.
because of the importance and the fact that it shows advantage over disadvantage. The black is used to show disadvantage. The melanated can be used, which is true, we are melanated, to show the advantage. So I am immediately going to be changing my language, and I'm calling all African people who are listening to immediately change their language. We are no longer black people, we are melanated Africans. But go
Let me
ahead.
say this. Let me say this one thing. The creator didn't create color. The creator created melanin, the green leaf,
Wow.
the hue of my skin.
Yeah.
Man created colors. The creator had no idea what a color was, only melanin
Melanated Africans, we
or
are.
carbon. Carbon with carbon people.
Sam, how is the sound for Dr. Jackson? It's really bad on my side. How's it for the audience?
I think
And
it's good. I can hear you.
while
It's
we're
good.
waiting for some feedback there, I have an interesting one that I've been toying with just now. Since we're talking facts in biology, science, and so on, I wanted to ask, but I'm also saying right off the bat that it's playing devil's advocate. I want to understand whether the term white in reference to the Caucasian tribe is based in anything, whether it's fact, truth, or science, or biology, uh, or if anybody knows where this term comes from to refer to a tribe as this color, white, because there's nothing that relates the Caucasian tribe with this color. Nothing. There's nothing. Not even albinism can explain it. My kids, they're now 17 and 15. So 12 years ago, we were very careful about the words we use around them, but obviously it slips out, and especially when people come over and they're like, "No, Papa, but that's not right. That person is not white," and of course they're not. They peach or what do you call it, caramel or chocolate or dark chocolate or what, like. But I guess I do know the answer. I just don't recall the exact detail.
Well,
But
I can tell you
whiteness,
in the United States, it was somewhere around 16, it was in the 1600s, when there were a great deal of people of color here, and the elites decided what they were going to do is call themselves white instead of by their ethnicity, instead of being Italian, instead of being Russian, instead of being Polish. What they saw they had in common was the hue of their skin, which was white. And so they went under white people. And there's actually a book by, I think it's Theodore Allen, and it's called the Invention of the White Race. And that's how the white race in the U.S. was invented. Um, and of course, it was the elitist. And there's a lot of other books out there called. There's another book by Cat called Caste. You can go out on YouTube and look at Dr. Her name is Nell Pointer. She was a professor at Yale University, and she talks about the creation of the white race, and it's based upon her academic research, and of course it hasn't been refuted and it can't be refuted. But
yeah,
where the word came from, I'm not quite so sure because you used the proper term. That was albinism, the depigmentation of a group of people over a period of time, being in the Caucasus Mountain where it was cold because pigmentation didn't serve them well in the cold climate. So over tens of thousands of years, the depigmentation happened. And I think Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, he talked a lot about that in a lot of his books. So that's how it actually happened. And again, it was just a biological function given the geography in which they resided. And that happened. And as you know, I can have a dark-skinned wife and I'm dark-skinned, but yet I can produce an albino baby, a baby with albinism, lack of color. And so that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, the sound is going a bit again, Doc. But I wanted to say, I mean, I'm sitting here, like on tenterhooks, like literally on the edge of my seat here, because whiteness is actually a decision.
Yes, it
That's all
is.
that it
Yes,
is.
it is. Yes,
They
it is.
just decided at some point that they are going to set themselves apart inside the Caucasian tribe as
Yep.
more sophisticated, speaking better.
Yes.
You know, they took everything away that made them who they were. uh, the Welsh language, the Celtic language, the very expressive languages of old.
The
They took
refusal to
everything away.
shower.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
I
yes.
wanted to, I wanted to first say though, America got all its really horrible bad things from London. So whatever is described in that book is a process that started in the queen and the king's country, the seat of evil, right? Because the Welsh and the Irish were oppressed by these sophisticated whites,
Mm-hmm.
and they fled to America to
Mm-hmm.
escape this oppression and this discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And they found the exact same oppression and discrimination against them by the whites that were there,
Mm-hmm.
until they too decided to give up their language, their culture, their religious and spirituality, everything for this bland term
Mm-hmm.
being called white. And when they started to call themselves white and started to pronounce the king's language in a really perfect way,
Yes.
then they became acceptable, and then they were assimilated into what we now know as, I mean, I want to end off here actually. White people will run as fast as they have never run before if they actually encounter a white person.
I get the joke there. Good one.
That took a while to sink in, man.
For those of you who've watched
That's
Game of
right.
Thrones, that should make some sense.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dr. Jackson, we thank you for your time, sir. Just one thing before I sum it up. We want to start a tradition where we're gonna ask our guests questions for the next speaker. So our next speaker is coming on the 20th of December, and we would like you to ask. We'd like to ask you a question that you would love to ask the next speaker. So, have you got any questions that you would have in mind that we can actually share with the next speaker who's coming on? Who we're going to do the same thing with. We just want to create a chain of questions for the next speaker. So have you got any kind of question in mind that you think you can ask the next person who's coming on the show?
What are you willing to do for the greater good of the liberation of your people?
Ooh. Sam, please write that down. What
Yes.
are you
And,
willing to
and
do
yeah, what are you willing to do for the greater good of your people?
for the
And
greater
that's
good of
really
your
asking,
people?
what are you willing to sacrifice? Because that's what
Yeah,
it comes
yeah,
down
Oh,
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
What are you
I
willing to
love that.
sacrifice? Yes, yeah. And let me, before we leave, I wanna give a call to action, right? Because transformational thinking, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say, yeah.
Transformational thinking is a call to arms. It's about finding and implementing solutions, not placing blame
The
and
audio,
shame.
the audio,
Sorry,
Doctor.
Terry, your audio is playing up again.
Okay, let
Yeah.
me. All right.
So while while while
Transformational
while while while
transformational
there's
thinking
sort of,
is this better?
it's still bad. No, it's still bad.
It's,
While you are
it's still bad.
sorting
Wow.
yourself out, somebody's No, somebody is saying, I've never seen a white person, seen a few painted white. Come to think of it, never seen a black person either. You see, Mr. Lee Hirschman. Black people, the blackness that refers to black people is not a color.
Nope. Nope, it isn't. It's this pigment.
Okay.
Blackness lives over here and over here. That's where blackness lives.
How is my audio?
Yeah,
Great.
it's still a bit, it's crackling, still crackling.
Hello? Test.
That's better.
Okay.
That sounds
All
better.
right. All right. Transformational thinking is a call to arms. It's about finding and implementing solutions, not placing blame or shame for problems.
Hold on, Terry. It's still crackling because we need to get what you're saying. It's still
Yeah,
crackling.
that's.
Because what you're about to say is very, very important, and we need to get it.
Could you
I
try
have a suggestion.
taking us off stage, maybe?
No,
Okay, let me take everybody off stage
Try
for
taking
now.
us off stage and leave him.
Okay, goodness,
or
hold
he
on.
could
I'm gonna
type
take
it
it.
let him type it and then you read it.
Oh no,
Oladile.
please take us
No,
off stage
no.
and try him.
We need.
Yeah.
Okay,
How does this sound?
that sounds way better. I can hear you now, sir. Yeah, that's
Okay.
better.
Perfect.
Transformational
Yeah, go on.
thinking is a call to arms. It's about finding and implementing solutions, not placing blame or shame.
Yeah, it's still
Problem.
It's still crackling a little bit.
Wow.
Oh, this is the
Okay.
best. This is the last bit. Please.
Let me
Let me take everybody off stage. Let me see if that works. Okay, try now.
Transformational thinking is a call to arms.
That's
It's about
better.
okay. It's about finding and implementing solutions, not placing blame or shame for the problems. It is a movement that happens deep within each of us. We must transform our own beliefs and thinking in order to solve the problems that we, not they, have created. It's time to expand the parameters of our own perception, to tap into the personal power we all possess, and only then, individually and collectively, can we successfully increase the quality of our reality, creating an environment that is conducive for substantial, sustainable.
Terry, I'm gonna take you out. Sorry, hello, Terry. I'm gonna take you out a little bit and bring you back in because it's a bit choppy. Because what you're saying is so important that I don't want nobody to miss that. So just bear with me. So I'm gonna bring you back in again. We're gonna try again. Okay, want to try now?
Yes.
Okay. If you want to try again, please, sir.
Okay. This transformational thinking is a call to arms. It's about finding and implementing solutions, not placing blame or shame for the problem. It is a movement that must begin deep within each of us. We must transform our own beliefs and thinking in order to solve the problems that we, not they, created. It's time to expand the parameters of our own perception, to tap into the personal power we all possess, and only then, individually and collectively, can we successfully increase the quality of our reality, creating an environment that is conducive for sustainable growth. This call is to militant groups on both sides of racial issues, political issues, and religious issues. This call is to politicians. This call is to business people. This call is to separate church and state. See, money is power in most of our societies. We need to get the politicians, the religious leaders, and the business people to ante up. It's time for some transformational thinking.
So I'm going to bring the others back. It was a bit choppy. What I would like to do is if we can write that, we'd like to write that up so I can post it so people, we can get it written so people can actually see it because what you're saying is very, very powerful.
Yep,
I
have it. It's actually from my book, and so what I'll do is take a piece out of the book and send it to you. Yeah, because the book is titled
Please,
Transformational
and I can just post.
Thinking.
I can post it.
Yes,
Okay,
I'll send
okay.
it to
I'm
you.
gonna find that. Actually, I'm gonna get that. Okay, I'm just gonna round up. Thanks to the crew and Duku, Brother Faisal, Dr. Jackson. It's been very, 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 very transformational for me. I'm gonna sum it up to my brothers in the diaspora and on the continent. Transformational thinking is what we need. We need to get out from the old to the new. We need to get away from the borrowed to go back to the Alkebulan, mother of mankind kind of thinking. We need to get back to Ubuntu. I am because you are because I am. And that's the community we have, that's who we are. Individualism, which is Eurocentric, is not us. We need to build a community. So, like Dr. Jackson has said, we need our brothers in the diaspora with the expertise. We need the brothers on the continent who know the fields and So we need to combine those two things together, and that's how we can build the Alkebulan. We can do away with the dollar
Yeah.
because we don't need it. We can do away with all foreign currencies we don't need. All we have to do is unite and build our own.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we've got another one coming up on the 20th, which is going to be deep diving into the same topics of transforming the way we think. We need to transform our minds, guys. We need to get away completely from what's not us to manifest who we should really be. Alkebulan.
Oladile, before we go, can we ask Dr. Jackson to come and pop in every now and again to see how far we are with the Alkebulan? Because we're not done with him by any stretch of the
No. We're gonna be
imagination.
talking. I'm gonna be talking to him offline, man. So basically, after today, we need more of you, sir. I think in terms of the strategies that we need to move our organization forward, we're gonna come to you because you share some wisdom there, and we need people like you on board to actually get us to where we need to get to. Because basically, we're an organization, we're a movement, we're building, and what you're saying basically resonates with exactly what we're trying to do. And we need your
We also
experience, we
need to
need your
find.
expertise. Yeah, go on.
We also need to find a way of making this a little bit more interactive,
Yeah.
more logistically interactive, and yeah, because we'd like to engage with the audience a little bit
Yeah.
more. I'm sure they would. I'm sure they're a little bit frustrated that
Mm.
not everything that they want to say and ask
Yeah.
gets some sort of exposure and attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, thanks a lot, Oladile, Dr. Jackson. It's been an honor. My sister Nduko, always love seeing you on the screen with me there, going toe to toe with some of the greatest minds at the Alkebulan continent and diaspora has ever delivered. Sometimes when we started journeys like this, you think you're alone and you become frustrated and so on. And then you go, but oh my God, they are gurus. They've been doing this for 50 years.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, everybody.
Can
Yeah.
Dr. Jackson please share that book one more time, his book, and where we
What's the
can
name of
get
the book, sir?
It is Transformational Thinking, the first step toward individual and organizational greatness.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for the time. We really appreciate you. I'm just gonna end that now and stream.